So, Vass, there's been some news and movement between the federal government and Google and Meta. What did we learn about these new developments?
Two things happened. One, on Monday, the government released a report sort of outlining more clarity associated with the act going forward, clarifying a cap, or that there will be a cap on how much companies would have to contribute to news organizations, which tech giants, or how they're going to decide who this applies to. They're also going to clarify that previously negotiated commercial agreements, so the agreements that may already exist between select news media organizations, may be able to sort of get an exemption going forward. So that's another really interesting point of clarity that I think wasn't as much in the public domain as it is now. And I think that's a pretty big deal. But the second thing that happened sort of just coincided with the timing is that on Tuesday, Canada announced it's fallen out of step with the OECD on something called a digital sales tax, DST. This is something we wanted to introduce 2 or more years ago. So this is another policy lever that feels pretty similar to the Online News Act in terms of that relationship between the Canadian government and the tech giants and that exchange of value.
Well, it does seem like there are some signs of negotiations there, but already 5% of Canadians are seeing news blocked on platforms like Instagram and Facebook. From your perspective, how likely will Google and Facebook follow suit with these threats they're making?
I think they've shown everyone that they are absolutely serious and they have the technical capacity to throttle news or turn it off completely. It's not historically new for a company of any kind to really say that if they're not in a favorable regulatory environment, they're going to pack their bags, pack up their toys and go home, right? What's different is in that digital context, it's more a question of keystrokes, right? So the landscape can change quite quickly. One day we can be throttling news and the next day it's accessible for everyone. And I think that dynamism is also important to recognize here as there's a push and pull between the government and these platforms, these corporations.
Now, we know Australia has similar legislation. Deals have been struck with tech giants and news organizations. How is that working? What do we know about what kind of money is flowing back into newsrooms?
There's quite a bit of optimism related to our emulation of that Australian model. There have been reports both from outside and inside the government that suggest between $150 and $177 million of economic activity has sort of flowed through those voluntary agreements. All of the agreements have been voluntary. There hasn't had to be arbitration. The legislation accounts for about 30% of editorial news salaries, and the hiring, the equivalent of about 50 new journalists. So that has made a lot of regulators, decision makers, and some people in the news industry quite excited about the changes we could see in just a couple of years' time as this legislation goes forward.
Thank you, Vass.
Thank you.